Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, wherever the place. Um, it's a pleasure that Alex sent me last week and asked me, what do you think about giving a session about the whole journey for Pravica and how we came with this, the technical challenges and some tech talks about the architecture and all these things. Maybe it will be useful for you through your journey of building something great that we all are looking for. So, can I share my screen?
I believe so. Do you have the option at the bottom? It's a green
Not yet.
box.
You do now.
Trevor's quick with that.
So I'll be transferred to this side. So simply speaking, when someone asks me what is Pravica, so I'm going forward to this very simple definition. So Pravica is a unified communication suite that meets with 3.0 standards and uses blockchain technology to empower user privacy and security. So this is why we call ourselves as a blind service provider. So in our presentation, we have this agenda. We need to talk about early days, because I believe if you don't have a history, probably you will not have a future. And also we will came through Pravica a little bit small demo, and then talking about Pravica architecture deeply, and then some tech talks about the architecture and how we solve the problems through the journey. So a couple of years ago, we started a very small MVP, and the vision at that time just to solve the business email compromise attack. We tried to solve the legacy protocols, that's old email systems that we are using these days, already built on top of these legacy protocols. By the way, SMTP and all these protocols has been built since last century. The main objective at that time is just to communicate, just to send you a message and then you can reply. And the whole privacy and security issues was not in the mind at that time. So we came with something called D-mail it was in April 2019. And then it was very easy. The message at that time that just to take back control of your emails. So complete privacy, no spams, and no accounts, just identity that you are controlling. It was the simple vision. Then we started to participate in the app mining program. If you don't know about it, it was a great program from Stacks in the early days at the Stacks 1.0 time. So we came through product hunt. We put the introduction. Yeah, great. That's it. We came on top of, we did launch over product hunt, and we saw a great traction from people, especially from blockchain industry, Blockstack at that time. And we succeeded to get the number 4 product of the week at the time of launching for D-mails. Then, wow, something happened at that time. Munib, he did a tweet. He published a tweet on his Twitter account mentioning that I'm using D-mails. There is a decentralized way to communicate with me. And he added his Blockstack ID at that time. And then Fred Wilson, if you don't know Fred Wilson, from USV, and USV is the main investor in Stacks, I believe so. And then he did a post also, he replied with a screenshot from D-mail, and he did authenticate inside, and then got the print screen and added as a reply on Munib's tweet. So then the journey started to complete at that time. We participated in the app mining program and succeeded from the first month to achieve the first place for 4 consecutive months. It was started June, July, August, September, and we were the first, we achieved the first place at that time. And then, well, I've got an email from CoinDesk. Someone wants to give like an article and he wants to interview me about the project. Later on, there was a service called the Block Stats. It was measuring how much users using your application at that time, but I believe that this service is down now. So here you can find, we started end of April, and the growth for emails at that time, and here is a spike here. This spike came because we have been selected from Ministry of Communication in Egypt to participate in a very big tech expo here in the Middle East in Dubai called GITEX. If you don't know, GITEX is the biggest expo in the MENA region, tech expo, and also the third biggest tech expo worldwide. So once we announce for public that we will visit or we will join 8 startups in the Egyptian part, then something like, I remember 25% increase in just 2 days from users in the Middle East started to know how you can use blockchain to secure the email communication. And then here is at our section, and this is the ambassador of Egypt in Dubai, came to us and discussed what you are doing, guys. How can we secure this? This is a great problem, and all these things. And then I had the chance to visit US, and I attended the fourth annual summit for Blockstack. It was in San Francisco, and to meet Munir personally and the whole team at that time. Back in GITEX, there was a place called Investor Lounge where you can schedule a time to talk with the investors. We started to talk with investors right there, and after a couple of months, we have got the first approval from 500 startups to invest in Pravica and to lead the pre-seed round. It was a huge success at that time. Then started 2020, and then COVID-19, and then we did a rebrand. Some people asked me why you changed from emails to Pravica. My simple answer is, when we tried to register email as a brand, we found that there is some other brands and trademarks called email. So this is why we decided to stay away from this hassle, from the trademark issues and all these things. And the most important reason is we started to think about not only solving the email problem, but why we don't work on the whole digital communication activities like chat, calls, conferences, emails, and all these digital communication activities. And then we did publish a blog post on our blog talking about this rebranding. Then we participated in accelerator program called Long Hash. It is a blockchain focused accelerator based in Singapore, and they are selecting the best from their point of view, the best startups, the potential startups working on the blockchain space to accelerate the process. Mid of August 2020, we succeeded to came with the initial version of the full communication suite based on your Blockstack ID. And then now you can use your Pravica web version to send emails, but emails here we don't use the normal email address, just your Blockstack ID, because everything is being encrypted using the keys that's being generated underneath of your ID. And then we have, because we started to target, at that time, the enterprises, talking with banks, talking with the governmental entities here in Egypt, and we started to close a couple of deals with governmental entities in Egypt, and we supported them with a very simple dashboard so that they can build their decentralized identity system for their employees and do the whole functionality related to these tasks. At the time of launching Stacks 2.0 last January, we already received a lot of feedback from users. Yeah, chat feature is really great, but we need something in our hands, not just web version. We started to implement the mobile version of our messaging app. This is why you don't need at that time to build the whole suite and investing time and resources. You just come with a very simple feature from your product and then start to get some statistics from user, and then you can take the decisions related. Mid of May, 15th of May actually, we came live on App Store, so that if you would like to use the Android version, if you'd like to use the iOS version, you simply can download it and start using Pravica and communicate with any other Stacks ID using Pravica messaging app. So now let's talk a little bit about the architecture, how we did build this product. So we have main 5 layers here: the blockchain layer, the storage layer, the communication or streaming layer, and the authentication layer. And on top of all of this, the app layer. Here we have the Bitcoin blockchain and Stacks blockchain, where everything related to your identity is created, stored, and then secured by this layer. And on top of this, we have the storage layer. We have a couple of items inside the storage layer. We have Gaia, which is related to all file management. And then we have something called Flurry, which is Web 3.0 blockchain database layer. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Then we have the communication layer, which is Web3, WebRTC protocol based, but we added another layer on top of it, which is the encryption layer. So the whole streaming is running already encrypted end to end, and by using your Stacks ID. And then on top of it, we have the authentication layer, which is based on Stacks Connect right now for the web application, and Stacks extension in the future. And then we came with something called Wise, and that I will discuss about it later. So in our architecture, we try to keep our value proposition. We need to make sure that every single message you are sending is private and secure. It comes by utilizing the digital signature using your keys. So if you would like to send a message, you have to sign a transaction to indicate that this message came from this ID. So the system just to verify if this signature is valid or not. And also, if you would like to receive a message, you need to sign a transaction ID related to this. And by solving the architecture, by coming with the group architecture, we solve the spamming issue. So even if I know your ID, let's assume that Trevor.id, I will not be able to communicate with Trevor.id unless I'm sending him a connection request, then he should approve. Without this step, I will not be able to connect with Trevor.id. So how it comes from the technical perspective? Simply at the client side, you generate something called group keys, group KP, keys pair, or K pairs. Then we are encrypting these keys with, let's say I'm sending to Trevor a connection request. Trevor.id, I would like to connect with you. So I'm creating this group and I'm encrypting the keys with Trevor public key, which is something public. And then sending some metadata about this group, like group ID, user encryption, group secret key, and all these things. Once Trevor approved, then the key exchange is done at that time, and we are ready to communicate together. This is a very critical architecture in how the workflow inside the application. So let's take the journey of, if I'm gonna send Trevor. Now, me and Trevor in the same place right now. We are connected to the same group. So if I'm gonna send hi using Pravica messaging app, if I'm gonna send him an email, whatever the communication activity, I'm just sending the message based on this type, and then I'm encrypting the message with the group private key that we already created from the last step. And then I'm signing a transaction from my ID to indicate that I'm the one who is sending this message. Then we are sending the message to the system or to the service provider, which is us, Pravica. What Pravica is doing is just to validate that this message came from Abdu and it's going to Trevor. How come? If you would like to validate the message, you need 3 parameters. This is from the cryptography part. You need the message itself, you need the public key, and you need the signature. I already signed the message, and there is a public key, and here is the message, encrypted and signed. So our system actually is validating if this transaction is done from this sender, and then add this message inside the block and inside the ledger. And then the other side, the receiver, will request the message, and then he will sign a transaction that I am the one who that this message belong to me, and then get the message and decrypt the whole content client side. By this methodology, we guarantee that everything is encrypted at the ledger, everything is related to the users, and there is no spam inside the system. So to come with the mobile version, we faced a lot of trouble at that time. First of all, the user experience of developing mobile application on Stacks at that time, it was difficult. And also, let me show you, here is a simple demonstration with the old things. You need to call the browser, it's deprecated. You need to call something in-app browser. It's not a good user experience. And you need to go through a long process to just complete the authentication functionality. And it was very hard at that time to use this concept because we need to accelerate the process. So after that, we thought maybe it would be a good time to come with Wise. Wise is a very simple tool developed by Pravica team, and the main purpose is to accelerate the onboarding process for the new users and make it in a very seamless user experience. Just use Wise. In less than 5 clicks, you will be able to get your user or your Stacks ID. By the way, I think this is the only tool available right now on the store. You can download it, you can create your Stacks ID. And for the time being, it's just your name, you're gonna select .id.stx. And then we took the whole identity management out of the app. And this is something very essential. You will not be able to get the trust from the users if you are putting everything related to the authentication process inside your app, because you need to put this part outside because there is key management functionality happening at this part. So we need to take it out of the app and then you need to put it in an open source format. And this is what actually Wise is doing. And we have a long vision for Wise to make it the generic tool for the whole developer community to accelerate developing more mobile apps for Stacks. So it came from actually Wise, W Wallet, identity, Stacks, and encryption. So now let's dive more technically about it. Right now there is a version live. You can go to npm and you can start using the JS library. And if you have any trouble, please talk to us and let's solve all these issues. In our plan, we will develop the iOS SDK and the Android SDK and put it in an open source format for the community. So every developer wants to develop any mobile app that based on authentication comes from Stacks IDs using BNS. He can use Wise easily, and just in one line, one command line, you're going to solve all these issues. I'd like to come through the authentication process. If you'd like to use this authentication process, also there is a lot of details. If you'd like to dive deeply, you can find in this link on Stacks documentation. Thanks for Stacks documentation for this great explanation for every single part inside Stacks tools. So simply by using Wise, you will import the initial classes and then create objects. These objects, you have three objects here. You have the app config, which is containing the privileges, like I'm asking the user to allow me to write on his own Gaia or to read from his own Gaia. And also you need to support the app URL and then a manifest JSON file, which contains the app name, the app icon, and all these things. Then you have a session store, which is a local storage at the client side, and also the user session, which contains all your data related to this app. These three steps are essential to establish the authentication process through your Blockstack, through your Stacks. Sorry, it's 3 years saying Blockstack, and now it's very difficult to just convert to Stack, at least for me. So by using this concept, you will be able to log in, and then here is, for example, if you'd like to use Gaia, it's in a very simple way. You are calling the functionality related to the encryption, and you are taking the public key, base64 image, for example. If I would like to send you an image over Pravica messaging app, this is how we are encrypting and put the file by using this one. You can call the Gaia and put the file on the user's Gaia to make sure that everything is stored in a decentralized storage architecture. So thank you so much. And like, if you have any questions.
Questions for Pravica.
I think I can stop sharing.
Mohammed, thank you very much. This was great.
I have a quick question, Mohammed. What do you store on chain and what do you store off chain?
On chain, which is one of the challenges that we are faced here. When you talk about communication platform, you are talking about collaboration between different users. It is not applicable to use Gaia at this level, because Gaia is just for you to put your files, to put your images and all these things. But you will not be able to put something encrypted inside Gaia and someone else can interact with it and decrypt, because it's encrypted by your keys. You will not be able to give him the private key. So we tried the different data management layer, and we found that someone called Flurry, it solves our problem in terms of data management layer and query operation, because it is a blockchain based by nature, and the architecture is related to the graph database, and it is very easy, scalable, and you can build your, but I think you just need this layer if your product is a kind of interaction between different entities, and you need to make sure about it. So on chain, it just the smart contracts that we will enable, maybe subscription using smart contracts and all these things, and the identity verification. Your identity is stored already on Stacks chain. So off chain, is the place we are putting everything related to the data generated from the app to guarantee high scalability and privacy and security features related to the encryption. We are putting all the messages, all the content, like emails you are sending and all these things inside on chain, on a Flurry layer.
Why don't we let Arkadiko take it away? Who do we have today? Philip, possibly?
Yep.
Awesome.
In fact, we have both myself and Neil today, who is another developer working hard on Arkadiko. So yeah, thanks for having me. My internet broke like half an hour ago, so I'm on my phone. Neil will be sharing his screen though, and he prepared all the technical goodies, Joe, that you were talking about. And thanks for the really kind intro, by the way. This, like you said, this started as a hackathon project back in January, February, I think, was the earliest time that I started thinking about, DeFi on Bitcoin specifically. And I wanted to help and build the Stacks ecosystem. And we looked at basically the missing pieces. And all of us were a team of 4 today. We are all pretty deep in DeFi. You can go down the rabbit hole in Bitcoin, but you definitely can do the same in DeFi, but not yet on Bitcoin. And that's where we want to make that big change and that big impact. We have today a stablecoin, as Joe mentioned. Basically, you collateralize your stacks, and based on that stacks position, you can mint some XUSD. But that's not the only thing. We look at ourselves more as a DeFi vertically integrated application. So you could refer to us as a liquidity protocol, a DeFi bank, everything that you want to do in terms of liquidity, we provide, whether that's swapping, stablecoin, lending, borrowing. But our cornerstone is definitely the stablecoin, which we will be launching next week on testnet, the 16th of June. So we're also in the Stacks Accelerator. So you will definitely hear way more of me and the whole team really in the next few weeks. But we'd love to have your hacking and breaking skills to make sure that once we go live on mainnet, which should be after summer sometime, we're ready for prime time and grow DeFi on Stacks. Having said that, I was actually going to plan to do a demo, but I can't because I'm on my phone. So that will happen another time. But definitely happy to answer any questions you guys have. But I'm gonna give it over to Neil first, as he will dive into some interesting source code pieces, share some learnings, best practices, and whatnot. But whether you have a technical or more functional question later on in like say 20 minutes, happy to go more in depth. And thanks again, Joe, for the kind words. Really excited.
Thank you for the introduction, Philip. So my name is Neil, and I'm one of the co-founders of Arkadiko. For today, I just wanted to highlight some substantial differences between creating a traditional centralized backend and a smart contracts protocol. I won't go into too much detail on the code because we've written a lot of code over the last couple of months. It's very specific to what we are building, but I will use the code to as an example to the problems and solutions we have found. I will use our staking contracts as a basis to kind of highlight some pieces of code, and that's why, of course, it will be useful to shortly explain what staking is for those of you who do not know. So staking, basically, you can send, as a user, you send tokens to a smart contract, you stake these tokens, and in return, you receive rewards. These rewards can be in the form of the same token, it can be a different token. There are some details to it as well. For example, the rewards can be auto-compounded or you need to harvest them yourselves. There are a lot of details, but basically you just send tokens to a contract and you will start receiving rewards. Now for us to go into a bit more detail, we have a governance token called DECO. And with this governance token, a user can make proposals and vote on proposals to make changes to our protocol. So Deco is used to make changes and vote, but Deco can also be used to stake and earn extra rewards in the form of Deco. So there are actually two use cases. But this is not something we really wanted. What we wanted is that the same user could stake, and in the meantime, they could also vote and create proposals. So that's why, for example, if a user stakes 10 Deco in our pool, they will get back 10 ST Deco, which stands for staked Deco. It's very simple. If you want to withdraw your 10 Deco again, you will need to send the 10 ST Deco to the smart contract. But the advantage of this is that with STDeco, you can also vote and participate in governance, create new proposals. So as a user, you can stake the governance token, earn more rewards, but at the same time participate in the progress of our protocol. Now let's look at a bit of code on how staking works. And I'm going to share my screen. 1 second. Here we go. All right, you should be able to see the code right now. Let's go to the pool contract. So this is one of the most important functions, of course, on our staking pool. It's a stake mechanism. I'm not going into detail on all these lines, but basically what it does is it updates the total amount that is currently staked in the pool. And as mentioned, then it will mint STDeco. And this coin, this token, is immediately sent to the staker or to the user. And then in the last step, of course, the Deco is transferred from the user to this contract. If we have a quick look at the unstake function, of course, it's a bit of the same thing, but the other way around. So again, we update the total amount that is staked. But this time we will burn the tokens, the STDeco tokens, which we received from the user. And then we will transfer the Deco tokens back from the contract to the end user. So this is very basically how our staking mechanism works. Now that we covered what staking is, let's talk about the first issue we have encountered. And it's around having a reference to time, because it's really difficult in smart contracts to use an exact timestamp to make calculations. And for us, for example, it's important to know when the user started staking, what is the current time, so we can calculate the difference, and based on that, calculate the amount of rewards the user will get. Now, because it's not possible to use timestamps, we opted to use the block height or block numbers, because this is very easy to get in Clarity. It's just an integer, so it's easy to save and it's easy to perform certain calculations on it. We have a very simple method right here. And basically what this does is it will check if this pool, this staking pool, is currently active. If it's still active, it will just return the current block height. If it's not active anymore, it will return the block height at which the pool was deactivated. This is important for us because if we want to deactivate the pool, we only want to issue a reward up until the point that the pool was deactivated. Now, another issue we faced is around implementing complex algorithms or complex calculations, because when a user stakes his tokens, we want to calculate the rewards over time, but the rewards, they change every block. And the rewards are also depending on the total amount that is staked on the pool. So these are two parameters which change over time, but which are needed to calculate the rewards of a given user. A very naive implementation would be to try to track the changes over time and keep kind of a history so that later on you could loop over every block and calculate the exact rewards for a given user. That would be fine if you only advanced 10 blocks, If you advance 10,000 or 100,000 blocks, this becomes way, way too complex for a smart contract to handle. So we needed to find a more easy way to implement this problem. But at the same time, we knew that the implementation would be an approximation of the exact requirements we have set up. And I think that's also what I wanted to mention. In many cases, we did set up certain requirements, but in a lot of times we needed to make some shortcuts or be very flexible in order to be able to just implement it in Clarity. So because of this, this simplification, instead of replaying and trying to calculate the rewards exactly, we worked with an estimation. And now, if you want to calculate the rewards for a given user, it's only really a couple of lines of code. So you can see we simplified a ton, and the approximation is still good enough. So for us, this is perfectly fine. By the way, if there are any questions in the meantime, please feel free to interrupt. It's always more fun to have a discussion than to perform a monologue. Actually, this brings us to a third problem we were facing. And often it is needed in a backend solution to periodically perform certain tasks. But on the blockchain, unfortunately, there's no such thing as cron jobs. So we can perform certain tasks, of course, when a user interacts with our smart contract. At that time, we could, for example, update some variables. Or we could create a public function, which we could call from an external server and have a cron job running on an external server to make sure a certain variable is updated every hour. Of course, if you want to create a fully decentralized application, it's not very good to be fully dependent on an external script that is running to keep your smart contract functional. So we always try to think about a strategy where we can leverage best of both worlds. And let me give you an example here. So as I mentioned, let me quickly search for the method. So as I mentioned, the rewards, the reward distribution is an approximation of the actual rewards in our requirements. And in order to be able to improve the approximation, it would be better if we could save the current rewards over time. So the more often we save the intermediate result, the better the approximation will become. And this method we see here, this is actually a method that's responsible to save the current rewards at a certain point of time. So if we would call this method every block, the approximation would be perfect, but of course that's just not feasible. So that's why we made this function public, so at least we as developers could set up an external script to call this function, for example, every day. At the same time, it's a public function. Everyone can call it. You can call it many times when you want. It will not harm the protocol. Everything will keep functioning perfectly. But because we don't want to be fully depending on our external cron job, of course, we also call this method when a user interacts with the protocol. So for example, when a user would stake tokens in our pool, we will keep track of the current rewards. So this way, we are not at all depending on the external call, but we do have the possibility of the external call to improve the approximation. So this is just to highlight kind of a strategy or a way of working around the limitations there are compared to a traditional backend. Another thing we ran into, and I think it's best I show this through the code immediately, is that it's not possible to dynamically call a contract. So what does it mean? For example, here you can see that we have saved the reference to a certain contract. But unfortunately, if we want to do a contract call, we cannot just use this variable because it's just not possible to dynamically make this contract call. As a solution to this, we always add a new parameter to the function. In this case, for example, the pool trade. So when a user would stake, the first parameter he will need to add is the actual pool in which they want to stake. Using this parameter, we can actually perform the contract call on the pool contract. But because we have a new parameter in this function, it's of course important to double check if the value that's passed in is actually something we want to accept. So in our case, we keep a map of all the pools that are active, so we can easily check if the parameter that is passed is actually a pool that is currently active in our protocol. I hope this makes sense so far. I see we have 8 minutes left. I think let's maybe just cover one more thing, and it's about changeability and upgradability. Because as you know, once a smart contract is deployed, it's not possible anymore to make changes to it. But at the same time, a smart contract will contain state, and as a smart contract is also a wallet, it can also contain tokens. For example, our pool will receive the decode tokens which a user stakes. Now, at the same time, we want to be able to upgrade our product over time. We want to be able to add new pools, to change rewards, to maybe add new features like auto compounding, etc., etc. Now, one way to do this could be to create a public method which is only available to your developers or an admin, and create kind of a migrate method which allows you to migrate state and or tokens from one contract to another. An example of this is PancakeSwap, the biggest stacks on the Binance Smart Chain. They have a migrate function so that developers are able to move funds, all user funds, from one contract to another. But obviously, this is not something you want in a decentralized application, because this also means that a developer can drain all user funds from the protocol. This also means that if a migration needs to happen, there can be human error. I've seen some projects where the developer sent tokens to the wrong address, and then the tokens get stuck. You want to avoid things like this. So that's why we opted for a mechanism where we can activate and deactivate contracts. And basically it just means if a contract is active, the contract is able to mint and burn our protocol tokens. At this point, it's DECO and XUSD. These are our protocol tokens. So let's say, for example, we want to change a pool, then we deactivate the old pool, which is not able to mint rewards anymore, and we activate a new pool in which the rewards are minted. For us, this is super important because we really want to keep the distribution of our tokens under control. So we need a way to shut down token distribution as well. Let's maybe have a quick look in the code, because it's really important that you think about this up front. Let's say we would deactivate this pool, but you still have 100 DECO in this pool. So you want to unstake your DECO to get your 100 DECO back. But unfortunately, what this method does is it will claim the rewards for you that are pending. And the reason for this is just because that makes calculations more easy, because every user starts fresh once the amount of staked token changes. But calling this claimed rewards method, this will try to mint your DECO rewards. As I just mentioned, if a pool is not active anymore, it will not be able to mint new protocol tokens. So if this pool is deactivated, but you still have funds in it, this function will fail. So the unstake function will fail as well. So if we didn't think about this upfront, we would have a big problem. And that's why we added an emergency withdraw method. And this method is basically the same as unstaking, but with the main difference that rewards are not minted, because this is the only thing that's keeping you from withdrawing your funds. Are there any questions at this point?
We have one question from Michael Neil. He says, if you can swap contracts on the fly through this system.
Basically, yes, it's possible. You could deploy or deactivate the old one, activate the new one, and then immediately you have swapped contracts. Of course, we have made it so that contract swapping is done through governance. So it's really the community that will decide or can create proposals with new contracts which they have uploaded. Then the community can vote, and if there are enough votes, then the swapping will happen automatically.
Yeah, to add on to that, so the DAO basically keeps track of all the contracts. You can think of the DAO as your governing body of this decentralized protocol. And if we see there's, for instance, a bug, right, in our smart contract, or we just want to upgrade features or functionality, we can propose a new contract with a new name, new version, whatever, to the DAO. And so the DAO is pretty much the only thing in Arkadiko that never ever changes. So once we go to mainnet, we tell all of our users, this address has the DAO deployed with this name. This is your entity to trust and will be your governing body to, do pretty much everything. So yeah, we made it super flexible, or at least try to by proxy be able to change things.
Can you elaborate on one specific example where that's changed for you, like since you launched on mainnet?
We have not launched yet, but maybe Neil, you can show how we dynamically do contract call invocations and look at the active contract.
Yeah, definitely. So the DAO contract, which Philip just mentioned, is shown here. And as you can see, it's really, really easy. So just a map that keeps track of certain addresses. And these are the contracts that are active. And there's only one function. Let me check. So this function, set contract address. This can be called in order, for example, to add a new contract, or also to remove an old contract by overwriting it. So it's the same for, we could, like, if governance, so only governance is able to use this method. If the community decides a new contract should be published, then when the votes are in and it's approved, then the only thing we need to do is, the only thing the protocol will automatically do is call this method and just update this map. So it's really easy, and because that was also our goal, to have full flexibility, but at the same time you want to keep it as simple as possible as well. We started out by creating very specific methods on all contracts, which could be changed by the community, but you end up with hundreds of different methods. So we just took the approach of, you can deploy a new contract, swap it, and basically that's it. Now, for example, I'm here again. Let's take the staking function. This is staking function on the pool itself. And here we actually check through the DAO if the contract that is calling this function is actually an active contract in the DAO. So it's very easy to check if certain contracts you use or certain callers are active in the DAO. I hope this explains or answers your question.
Yeah,
Right.
thanks. That seems elegant. I appreciate that.
There's another question from Gary. It's a bit more functional. Can we leverage your stablecoin as a way of having people pay for services in USD and then do the conversion to Stacks behind the scenes in real time, I guess, if you want that. So yeah, the purpose of our stablecoin is really to have it backed by something, and that something today is Stacks. So you deposit Stacks as collateral to mint stablecoins against. That stablecoin can be used for anything you like, really. Even swap back to Stacks on a swapper on an exchange that supports XUSD. But the main purpose of it is to give the end user some stable value to do, I don't know, prediction markets or swapping, trading, margin trading, do something with derivatives, e-commerce, gaming, maybe use it on Pravica to send value to each other. Because I can imagine that you don't want to be exposed to the volatility of Stacks or Bitcoin or any volatile crypto asset for that matter. That's why in the future we have this thing called XUSD on Stacks. So yeah, what you do with it in real time, either convert it back into Stacks, that's really up to you. That's not something that the protocol handles for you, but you can definitely do that in an automated smart contract or script.
So technically, thank you for that. So technically, we can purchase Stacks, and like, can we purchase Stacks in real time, or do we have to set up a wallet that's already sort of pooling Stacks to have the stable coin, or can we transfer Stacks in real time?
Yeah, so you definitely have to be hooked into the Stacks ecosystem. So the minimum prerequisites are having the web wallet installed with some Stacks tokens on it, and then you can access our tooling, Arkadiko, in other words, to buy XUSD, sell XUSD, mint XUSD, and do several other things. Yeah.
So we'd have to connect with you guys first, essentially, and set it up.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, unless there's someone else, right, that just wants to, that has integrated XUSD. Our platform mainly facilitates the minting and buying and selling, but nothing stops another application in the Stacks ecosystem to integrate our stablecoin and transfer value that way. That's the end goal, obviously, that not everyone has to go through Arkadiko. We love users having used our product, but yeah, essentially the XUSD stablecoin should be everywhere in 12 months and not just in Arkadiko.
Super. No, very thankful. Thanks.
Really excited to hear straight from the horse's mouth a little bit about Risidio. Why don't you take it away, Mike?
Amazing. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, really good to be here, and amazing company. So Arkadiko, that's problems we're thinking about in terms of proxying contracts. Can you see and hear me? Yeah. Mohammed, I didn't realize Pravica used to be DMAL, because I used to be in awe of DMAL at mining days. I'll share my screen and just go through a little bit about the history of Risidio. Am I sharing this now? Can you see this thing? Radical?
Yeah.
Yeah, we were kind of like in app mining too in the early days, 2018, 2019. We had an app that was using Gaia for storage and actually minting NFTs on Bitcoin directly using the return code. So we went through a massive learning curve in those days. I had a massive detour with this project DBID, which was a short-lived, noble attempt to build a decentralized marketplace without the use of a blockchain to maintain state. So we were doing that kind of stuff with using public and private keys to encrypt the messaging between the buyer and the seller, but obviously without the kind of technology that Pravica are introducing, where we could actually communicate between the buyer and seller without them having to log into the application. So it's really interesting to see how things have evolved and how the space is moving on. We've kind of moved on from app mining, and I guess the biggest lesson that I personally have learned from the app mining days is that you can't do this stuff by yourself. You can't just have the tech and throw the tech at it. You've got to have the business development people. You've got to have the design people. And so the history of my timeline and then meeting Peter and partnering with Peter is that kind of journey through going from playing with the technology to building a business and really trying to understand what that means at a higher level, dealing with the marketing. Another project we started in the early days that I built with a friend of mine called Morris. Morris, I don't know if you know the Black Swan logo on Bitcoin. It's a very famous Black Swan logo. So Morris actually designed that logo. And he created this application, Loot Bomb, which I kind of built with him. Just around the time that I met Peter in early 2019, I think this was mid 2019. So this is still early days, and actually we won Can't Be Evil 3 for the best Lightning enabled app on Blockstack as it was then, of course. So that was really exciting, and kind of what we were trying to do was I don't know if you've seen Loot Bomb. I mean, the interesting thing about Loot Bomb is in a way the kind of bits and pieces that we learned through the course of building it. So, for example, there's a way of buying spins on Loot Bomb, and you can select the number of spins you want. But then we were like, okay, so how do we do the payment for that? And what we ended up with was a kind of NPM module that can be shared and reused very easily between different projects, that we can basically customize and use in different contexts. So we can allow fiat, Bitcoin, partnering with OpenNode. We can take Lightning payments, and of course, Stacks. So Loot Bomb is live on the Ethereum blockchain at the moment, and obviously we're porting it to our solution. So this is kind of where we came in with. I won't go to that one just yet. I'll just show you the exchange. So our first grant application to the Stacks Foundation, which, as you guys know, replaced app mining in last year, around September last year, was using this experience that we had with the OpenSea platform and running Loot Bomb on OpenSea, and we kind of wanted to build our own kind of decentralized marketplace, but on the Stacks ecosystem. So everything we've been doing has been kind of gearing up and moving towards how do we do decentralized marketplace on the Stacks blockchain. And so this application here is the first iteration towards that. And this was finished as a grant application in December. We kind of realized that the payment card could also be turned into a minting card. So we kind of built this kind of decentralized this module that basically connects to the Stacks network behind it. And I'll just switch into slightly more technical. Our talk is like midway between technical and non-technical. I think Peter's going to follow me with some slides in a minute. So the thing I wanted to say here was just jumping into our contracts. So as you say, pointed out, Joe, it's a bit of a beast of a contract, this marketplace contract that we have. A lot of it was driven by the requirements of the This Is Number One project, which you're going to hear about in a minute. And it was kind of like, wow, this is suddenly real. Like you're playing with stuff 1 minute, and the next minute you've got a real client and you've got a real deadline, and you've got to make this stuff work. So we were kind of like thinking back through the history, like it was a long-term goal to actually get bidding on chain and do auctioning on chain, kind of in a way that doesn't like pretend to be a decentralized project. It doesn't like you're not just doing the transfers in the ERC contract. You're you're actually taking the bids on chain as well. So they're fully transparent. So that was the kind of goal here. One of the key things about this is the bidding in it actually sends a bid into the contract, and the next bid refunds the previous bid and replaces it with the current bid. So there's no kind of gaming it, basically. So the contract kind of very much matured in a very, very short space of time. And then looking back on it and talking to Marvin as well, and thinking about what Arkadiko just said, you know, one of the things we really want to do is figure out a way to proxy contracts, like you can do with Solidity, where you've got inheritance. You can deploy a thin contract and have the functionality behind that, so you can actually redeploy contracts. I don't know if there's some kind of solution in what we just heard there. It would be interesting to know more about that. But of course, the other issue is the traits. So I think Fridka showed us the NFT trait. So this is now a SIP. We're implementing this, of course. So this is the basic transfer function. What we're also thinking about is approvables. So adding to the basic SIP is how do we give another principal the permission to transfer an NFT on the owner's behalf. So the ERC 721 standard basically has this section for how you do this. You can proxy the ability to transfer an NFT on the owner's behalf if they've given you permission. And this is effectively how the OpenSea platform works. So OpenSea enables a kind of matching algorithm between sell orders and purchase orders. And it does this because it keeps, it's able to have an approval for itself to be able to do the transfer. So we've actually kind of built this idea into the contract. Another really key idea that we built in that was part of the This Is Number One project is this idea. And this basically lets you set up royalties for who's going to benefit from the sale. So, and this is all kind of baked into the contract. It's actually, been tested and deployed. And what we're trying to do is kind of go like so. One of the learning experiences here is we focus so hard on how you transfer the money when the initial sale is made that we didn't think about the secondary sales. So it meant that the person who bought the first one would be paying the same royalties to each subsequent seller. So we had to bump the version 2 of the contract that's actually deployed, which is here somewhere. And basically that deals with reducing the royalties in the original contract to 10% of what they are in the original one. So the secondary sales always pay like 1/10 of what they paid on the original time through. So that's a bit about the royalties. If you're interested, we can very happy to do a deeper dive into the contract itself and show how these methods actually work. Okay, so I think it's probably time to hand over to Peter. I did want to say a load more, but I've run out of time. So are you there, Peter?
Yeah, you've got a couple more minutes, Mike. That's fine.
Okay. In that case, I'll just say about prom. There's a few things I could say. Okay, so one of the key things we're trying to do with or the kind of suite of products and services that we're building at Risidio is to create the conditions for the adoption of the web wallet. That's our key goal, is to how do we get people from either the crypto universe, people from Ethereum, and then looking beyond that to Cara Delevingne fans, for example, or Fatboy Slim fans, to actually come and buy, get the web wallet, get some stacks, do some transactions. And this is like what all of the projects we're working on. So the thing I'm showing you at the moment is a new project that we've just started with some guys from Hollywood, and we're building a 3D metaverse So you can see a very early, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to show you that. Very, very early manifestation of this universe. So one of the things we're thinking of doing is hiding, minting editions of number ones and hiding them inside this metaverse. So we've got an amazing team generally, but Jamal is doing the 3D design here, and he's building interiors for these buildings in which we can, a bit like Crypto Voxels, if you know that project, a bit like where we can hide artworks from This Is Number One, potentially, and and then incentivize people to get the web wallet and start playing with this stuff in reality. So that's a very, very fast, overarching explanation of our journey. I think Peter's going to give you a little bit more on the business side. So I'll stop sharing here. If anyone's got any questions, I'm happy to field them here or on Discord.
Thanks, Mike. I'm going to be even quicker in going through this, so I will go very quickly, but yeah, there'll be plenty of opportunity to follow up. So I think one of the key things that that we looked at when we were working on some of these projects, in particular the project with This Is Number One, was to look at the whole way that the industry has not only been sort of exploited over the years, but the changes that have gone on, in particular over the pandemic. And so we were driven by a lot of those issues, which we'll pick up in a little while. Another really important aspect for us in everything that we did with these projects was to consider both the charitable and the environmental issues, the aims, sustainability issues, and we worked with charities on this project, and we'll cover that in a moment. Our journey, as many of you may know, goes all the way back to the early stage of the app mining project. And Loopbomb was our first project. It was a decentralized generative art application that's currently running on an OpenSea, so it's on Ethereum. And one of the drivers for us in moving across to Stacks was, I think, as a lot of you know, with all the problems on Ethereum with the gas fees and everything. So that was a very, very early driver for us that took us from Ethereum to Stacks. And one of the things that we worked on very early on was a payment card that could enable both crypto and fiat payments on any website or any application. And we'll be coming round a bit more to that as we go forward. The next thing that we worked on was a minting card. And the minting card, key issue with the minting card, which I think Mike's just covered, was the ability to allow artists to set royalties, and we felt that was a really, really important feature. The thing that we're moving on to at the moment, which is in production and should be finished in the next couple of weeks for launch, is a universal minting application. And we're actually using the functionality of that application here today. You'll see that in a moment. And of course, many of you will be familiar with the early ideas that we had around the Risidio exchange, which is generally the platform that we're looking to launch over the next couple of months. Key issue here was to, is this issue that I think everybody's sort of aware of, is what comes first, the applications or the marketplace? And, we built the exchange, and now, as Mike was showing, we're building the applications that can populate the exchange. And this was really one of the drivers that pushed us on to This Is Number One, the project that we're going to speak about now, which is a collaboration with the artist Chemical X. And the motivation for that was to raise money for good causes. was really an opportunity to create completely unique new forms of art that can be collected and traded online. And the beneficiaries of that, the charities, the artists, continue to get a percentage of that revenue every time the artwork is traded. So when you go to secondary sales, everybody benefits all the way down the line. I think this is a really great opportunity for me now to introduce the artist, Chemical X, that we worked on from the beginning of This Is Number One project. And I'd like to give him the opportunity to just talk a little bit about, what motivated him as an artist, or any of these artists or any of these celebrities, to actually work on a project like this. So, Chemical X, over to you.
Hello there, can you hear me? Okay, well, I know you're recording this, but don't share it anywhere. Hello. So, hello there. So, yeah, let me tell you, firstly, I'm not a part of the crypto world. I don't really understand a lot of it. I do have a background in art, but also in brand development, stuff like that. But essentially, I've been working as an artist for 10, 15 years. And somebody brought me in and said, oh, you should do an NFT. And I obviously said, what the hell's that? It was a few months ago. And quickly discovered that essentially what I saw was, oh, this is interesting, because this is a way of, like 30 years ago, I designed a logo for a club called the Ministry of Sound in the UK. And it was seen really even by the V&A museum as the last original logo, the last one that was done the way that logos had been done for like decades. It was original piece of, where you could say that was the original. And there was no original, everybody said, okay, well now digital art, every artwork's done in digital, there'll be no more originals anymore. And then here we are 30 years later, literally 30 years in September it will be since the ministry logo was done, that we've now created a way for a creator to go, no, this file, this is the original one. I know how easy it is to copy, and that kind of happened in the music industry, when streaming came along, when the value of having a record came and went. And so I saw it as, here's an opportunity for somebody to really to own particularly moving image. Artists already have to work in a single frame, so and tell their story in a single frame, and yet all other people in the arts, musicians and dancers, everybody else, they have time. So first off, I saw, yes, NFT world is filled with 3D artists and digital artists, because they're the ones who are there already, and they're the ones who are populating already, and those are the people that have found it very difficult to monetize their work for a long time. So great that they've been able to do that, but that isn't where it's going, and that isn't the opportunity. I don't think creatively it's merely that's one style. I think the idea about being able to tell stories, being able to have something that's short, that's still artistic, that can do all the valuable things that art does, can be powerful, engaging and educational and emotional, all those kind of things. So rather than, of course, at that time, I could just do what everybody else is doing, go and do it on Ethereum, go and stick it on Rarifiers, stick it on Makers, whatever, do what everybody else is doing. But when I was introduced to it, I was also introduced to Stacks, and I was introduced to Risidio and their shared vision for a better world, And that's the thing that really interests me, even though despite it's going to go, okay, well, go over here with the guys who are still small, who don't have that established, who are doing all the hard way, but they're doing it for the right reasons. And those are the things that got me interested, because I see the longer idea about what NFTs are going to be. And I see how these things are going to change a lot of things. And art is seen as one of them at the moment, but I don't think it's going to change that. I think it's an opportunity to do something positive. And from my point of view, it's about, the most valuable thing that you create doesn't tend to be technology, doesn't tend to be a product, it tends to be a brand, because those are the things that can't be replicated by other people. So you get this. And a brand is about starting a friendship with somebody. So we want to start with a person. This is number one, as something that has ethos. So the people that we work with, and the reason why, and kind of what Stacks has got all that stuff, but what it didn't have was kind of content and endorsement. So I went to people that I feel are kind of iconic in so much of in popular culture, either modern or in the past, and people that have done they're not kind of the latest people turning up. They were people that were also able to tell their stories in interesting ways. So this is how I brought in people like Cara. I know it says Cara's got 43 million followers on Instagram. You're not gonna. She's like she could do an NFT with anybody. She could have done this in any way. Same with Norman, same with Fatboy Slim, same with Dave. All of them. They could have all just gone and done what everybody else does. And I've got other people lined up potentially to work on it. And most of the time I've sat down, had a Zoom call with them, and we've talked about what Stacks is about. We've talked about what Risidio is about. We talked about what This Is Number One is about. The longer idea of this being, these are the first 5, but the idea is in the longer term that it grows into a gallery of stories, a gallery where you start to put totally different people together, but an artist and a dancer and a poet and a rapper and a photographer and an architect. And you start to put things together and you start to tell stories in a way where you make these little things, but they have this ownership. And then we'll look to do, these will all be number ones because these are the first Bitcoin NFTs. And so these will all be number ones, and then we'll do editions of other stuff after that. But the longer idea is that the people that we're speaking to are all in it for the long haul. And it kind of, I've learned there's a lot. It's kind of, I've walked into somebody's lab where they've got this machine that can do an amazing thing, but it's all in bits and it's all just held together with little bits of wire and everything else. And it just needs to come out of somebody's garage, like Microsoft Garage or the Apple Garage, and be turned into this smooth machine, this brand, this totally seamless, frictionless experience. At the moment, I'm coming across a lot of things that are friction full, if there's a thing like that. It's still clunky, and there's still lots of things from a consumer's point of view that I see is quite difficult. And I see what's really important is to onboard people that have no interest in cryptocurrencies or NFTs, people that are going to, so for Cara's one, say we're going to do an edition of 10,000. We're going to, and we're going to give those away. This is a bit of a giveaway. I think, Trevor, if you want to have a look in your wallet, you might find one of these.
All right.
Everybody can have one of these. Well, we're doing an edition of 1,000 of these, and we're going to send you a link, and you can have it for free. And this is an original piece of Fatboy Slim music. So anyway, I think there's they're going to share that with you in some way, and you can get a link and you can have that and put that in your wallet yourself. Is that right, Peter?
That's absolutely right.
Good. Well, I'll give it back to you now. And essentially, yes, I'm very much behind what everybody in the Stacks community is about, and what Web 3.0 is, and open source, and all this stuff. And I'm very keen to get behind trying to build a strong brand that brings endorsement and content to that that we then to start to bring people over. You know, we built a really lovely shop in the middle of the desert. I just need people to build some roads.
Thank you, Chemical X. Thank you very much. It's been great to work with you. This is Chemical X's gift to all of you. He wanted to let all of you be the first people. Well, I think Trevor might have been the first one to it. It might have shown up in your wallet, Trevor. Have you seen?
Yep, it's in my wallet right now.
Amazing. So you will all, I think there's a link in the chat right now, and that link, if you follow that link, that will take you to where you can get your Fatboy Slim giveaway for no cost whatsoever. And I think you'll be all part of the first 100 of this edition. It's very, very simple. I think if you don't have a Stacks wallet, I mean, if you've got a Stacks wallet, really straightforward, log in. If you've got funds there, then the process will be very, very smooth indeed. The minting might take a little bit of time, maybe up to an hour. So allow up to an hour. Obviously, that's an issue that everybody's working on at the moment. If you don't have funds, if you don't have Stacks in your wallet, you can let us know and we'll provide the Stacks for you. The gas fees are, as you know, very, very low indeed. And the only thing that we'd ask of anybody is if you would kindly fill out the survey, and there's a link for the survey there that will help us and provide really helpful feedback. That's basically it. Thank you.
Go and get those NFTs, everyone. Wow, what a take it away, Jason Schrader. Close us out today.
All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for making the time here. Let me go ahead and get my screen up for everybody, and we'll kind of walk through a little bit of what I wanted to share today. So as Joe was saying, you know, this has been quite the project to see come to life. And just to make sure, does everybody see that presentation up on the screen there?
Yep.
Excellent. All right. So CityCoins. This is actually something that started as a project to repurpose proof of transfer to take what we know it as on the Stacks blockchain and to implement it in a smart contract to achieve a few goals. So initially here, if you haven't heard about the project, or just to give you a quick primer of what we're doing, CityCoins offer people a way to support their city and grow a crypto treasury. And in doing so, you can earn a Bitcoin and Stacks yield. And each city will have their own coin. We're starting with Miami and Miami Coin. We just had a fun launch party around that in Miami and around the Bitcoin conference. And we're really excited about what this can unlock. So to start with, let's talk a little bit about why a city coin makes sense. So at launch, the initial benefit of creating a city coin will be in both the Stacks and the Bitcoin yield. But one of the things we want to emphasize on is that city coins are programmable. And over time, we're hoping to see new utility pop up over the top of that. So as Joe mentioned, there may be ways to implement this in a city to use that yield for different city projects, or to create something like a proof of HODL login, where having a Miami coin could lead to accessing something specific to Miami. So with that in mind, I did want to just outline some of the logic and some of the things we went through, as well as some of the learnings that we came across in writing this contract and getting it deployed. So first off, we have our token. The token, any city coin that's created, is a fungible token that adheres to the CIP10 standard. And there's going to be one city coin contract deployed per city. There is no pre-mine, no ICO, and city coins are only available through mining. Eventually, though, we do hope to see these city coins on both centralized and decentralized exchanges. And as liquidity comes online through mining, then it will be available for purchase. So with that, we also have a token issuance schedule. And the way this works is once mining begins, the current Stacks block height is recorded in the contract. And from there, the issuance continues in a structure very similar to what we see in Bitcoin and Stacks, but it will be based on Stacks blocks. So just like we saw with Stacks, the first 10,000 blocks, there will be an increased reward to help bootstrap miners and get people online. Then it will reduce down to a standard reward. And from there, it will have approximately every 4 years or 210,000 blocks, all the way until we get to just over 1 million Stacks blocks, at which point it will continue indefinitely. Now, this decision was made because mining is the main engine that funds the city wallet. And through that, we wanted to keep it alive. You don't want mining to just end. So there will be some tokens created indefinitely. However, that number definitely reduces from what we see here in the beginning. Moving on from that, there's three main components to this contract and to the main interactions that people will have with CityCoins. The very first is registration. So mining cannot begin, even after the contract's deployed, mining cannot begin until 20 unique wallets submit a transaction to register. This was designed to mimic what we saw with the Stacks 2.0 launch and to make sure that there was a fair and widely voiced need for this before it begins. Now, once that threshold is reached, there's a 150 block countdown, which should be about 24 hours. And then the mining and stacking functions become available. So let's talk a little bit about mining. The way this works is miners compete by sending stacks in a block, and after doing so are selected by a VRF weighted by their contributions against the total. Now, 30% of the miner bids are sent to a custody wallet right off the bat, and 70% are sent back to stackers. Following that, we have stacking, which very familiar concept to all of us that love stacks. You can lock up your CityCoins for a number of reward cycles. Those reward cycles are 2,100 blocks in length, and you can stack for a maximum of 32 reward cycles. And in return, you receive a portion of that 70% that's sent to stackers by the miners, and that's proportionate to the amount you've stacked compared to the total stacked. So very similar mechanism here to what we see in proof of transfer, and really trying to lean on some of the successes that we've seen there and implement it in a way that it could be used for something new. Now, the contract itself actually started with a project that was put together by Jude Nelson. We called it Poxel, or POX Lite. And the simplest form of it was to simulate proof of transfer, and we've actually evolved this quite a bit since. So if you look at our contract on GitHub, you'll see that we have about 228 commits on top as of today. We're pushing about just over 1,000 lines of code, which is an impressive size for a Clarity contract. I haven't seen anything deployed like this yet, with 9 public, 18 private, and 30 read-only functions. So everything lives here on GitHub. Definitely encourage people to take a look if they're interested. And at the very end of this session, we'll have a little Q&A time if anybody has any questions. And of course, feel free to reach out to us. The best places to look, we also have a Discord channel for CityCoins, and we can continue some discussion there as well. So let's get into a little bit of what this will look like. Now, our user interface is a very basic approach. We actually took a clone of one of Frieger's project, because we all love Frieger. And he had an interface for the send many contract that was created recently. So we're using that and have modified it to interact with our contract. We're also trying to create this as a template repo. And the goal with this is to create something that anybody could spin up their own CityCoin following what we've learned and what we're doing in this initial example. So you have the contract on one side, which could be created for any city or honestly for any purpose that makes sense with a similar mechanism. And then you have the UI, which could be cloned, repurposed, and set up for whatever branding needs to be done. So moving on, you'll see some of the basic interactions to those functions I mentioned earlier is you have like your registration. This is the first screen you would see, kind of comes up before registration has happened, and gives you the chance to submit that transaction as well as see kind of the progress of where things are at. Once you get through the registration, we move on to mining. Mining in itself is just choosing an amount to send, as well as choosing a time period. So something I'll get into later that we ran into was execution costs as far as the Clarity contract goes. But in its current form, we do have the option where you can mine in one block, or you could submit a transaction to mine over 30 blocks, which gives you about a 4-hour window to continue at a set rate. And that should alleviate having to send a transaction every block. Now, below that, you can see the claiming side of things. Now, since we're working with a smart contract, We send our stacks into the contract in order to do the mining. There's actually a 100 block maturity window that occurs before miners can claim their rewards and know that they're the selected winner. That's in order to protect the VRF seed. And once that time passes, you can go back at any time to claim your rewards from your mining activity. So as you can see below, the example would be like, hey, I won this many in this block. I can go back and claim it. And this is a very simple experience for the user. And we try to make it as easy as possible to get involved with this, because we definitely want everybody to be able to take part. On the other side of mining, of course, we have stacking. So with that, very similar interface. And in this sense, you would be putting up or sending your Miami coin into the contract for the amount of time that you specify. And after that time passes, you're able to go back and claim your rewards, or after that reward cycle passes, to be more specific. So similar to the interface we saw for mining, you would be able to see, hey, there was this much stacks sent by miners. This is what is your portion, as well as reclaim the Miami coin that you've stacked inside of the contract. So a quick overview of the UI there. And really what I'm excited to get into is what we learned through testing and contract execution. So for our contract testing, we actually chose to use Clarinet, but we're also using Dino, and we're simulating what you would see with typical tests written in JavaScript. So here's a quick example of just one little test that runs. And we actually have about 100 tests right now, and we'll get into our code coverage a little later, because there was actually a recent release of Clarinet that helps visualize that through standard tools that we're all used to. So testing is performed with Clarinet. One thing we do as far as the testing as well is we use NPM to prepare and execute the tests, because there are a few things that need to happen in order to make it as smooth of a process as possible. So with NPM, what we're doing is we actually copy all the contracts to a separate folder. We modify the address that we use with our imply trait for the SIP10 standard, because there's one that's supported by Clarinet, and then of course there's been a few revisions and now a final version on mainnet. So we are using the latest version on mainnet, but we kind of retrofit the one that Clarinet wants to see in order to avoid errors. And then we also have an additional contract. So in our test add-ons folder, we can add extra functions that we needed in order to do the testing, but that wouldn't show up in the actual contract deployment. So with this structure, we've seen a lot of success in being able to go back and to be able to test as much as possible. And that leads us to our code coverage. So here you can see that with our 100 tests, we've actually achieved 84.2% code coverage. And I'm really proud of this because we're covering almost all of the functions in the contract. There are some limitations, like being able to test the actual VRF and obtain the randomness that we need in a test format was a little difficult. But at the same time, the goal here was just to say, hey, if we're going to put this out there for everybody, we want to show that it does exactly what we said it's going to do. So this was the code coverage report that was generated, and we're going to be adding this in, as well as the new CI workflow that is available. We want to add that as well, so that every push that comes through to GitHub, this information gets updated and it becomes a very fluid process. Now, in doing this, we definitely ran into some challenges. And one thing I will say is when something goes wrong, it is not always clear where it went wrong. And in doing that, console info, console log, very, very helpful in figuring out what's going on. So, we're always looking at block heights, where we are, especially when you're trying to simulate something like mining and stacking, where we have to activate mining, and then we have to move past the activation window, and then we have to do a mining transaction. And then if you include stacking, you have to move past the stacking reward cycle in order to claim rewards. So there was definitely some challenges in there, but in the learnings, it gave us a way to really simulate what's going on. And we are able to set up a clean environment before each test. So it's almost like resetting the chain every single time that we go through and that we test things. Now, in order to do that, some constants definitely had to be converted into data bars. And with that, it allowed us to make changes both during tests and to execute a few different things that were not available in the original contract. And one of our gripes, or one of the more difficult things, is that the execution costs were not automated as part of this test. So in order to get those costs, we had to go through a few extra steps. And I can outline a little bit of that next here. So costs in particular are something really interesting to look at, and something that actually caught us by surprise in the very beginning of working with this. When we took the original Poxel contract and we ran it through some early testing that showed execution costs, we actually found that the contract was taking up 50% of the runtime cost allotment, and it was just way too much to be feasible on mainnet. So this led to a bunch of refactors, and we started really looking at how we could reduce the cost of this contract. And just in changing the way some of the functions operated, changing some of the way that we stored the data, we were able to bring that down to near 3 to 6% of the runtime cost per transaction. This is still a little expensive in my opinion, but given what we're trying to do and what we're trying to implement with this contract, it definitely felt like a big win as well. So for anybody who hasn't seen what cost testing looks like in Clarinet, we do it through the Clarinet console, and it usually involves calling the functions and then using the get costs method in order to see the results. So here's an example where we would go through and set our activation threshold, register a miner, move the chain, and then set up so 2 miners submit a transaction, and take a look at what that costs. The results that come out of this are pretty interesting, actually. So here's an example of what we were seeing on the high end, where in our mining function, we are allowing for up to 128 miners to participate. We don't see it getting that high, but we wanted to leave that threshold as high as possible. And we have a function that once that limit of 128 miners is hit, then anybody submitting after that fact can still get on the list of miners. And the way that works is if you bid higher than the lowest bid that exists on the list, then you are put onto the list and the lowest bidder is pushed out. In doing that, it helped to make sure that one person couldn't just set up a whole bunch of wallets, occupy all the slots, and kind of minimize that attack vector to where it would become very expensive to try and be the only miner who is submitting a whole bunch of transactions. So with that, you can see here, that's our top end of about 6% of the contract or of the runtime cost. And this is what that output looked like as we were doing the testing and everything else. So given the size and complexity of the contract, one thing that we learned that was surprising but made sense after the fact is running a read-only function. Something as simple as just getting a miner's ID from the map was actually near as expensive as running a function such as mining or stacking tokens. So, you know, when you consider that all of the code is loaded and instead of being compiled, the overall size of the contract is definitely something to consider as we look at how we do our cost and execution costs. With that in mind too, we also tested out some basic optimizations. So this was something that I am still sort of on the fence about, but I do like this idea. I said, hey, what happens if we remove all the comments, we remove all the blank lines, we reduce the tab spaces, and we replace some terms that might have shorter variants? Now, in doing that, we didn't want to sacrifice the decidability of a contract. It's beautiful that you can see the source on chain, and I don't want to minify it in a way that would be comparable to what we see with like minified JavaScript or CSS on the web now. But I did want to see like how much of a difference it would make if we took these kind of initiatives to really drop down the code and make it as small as possible. So with that, we actually saw that it made a difference. You know, you can see here that the total file size was nearly cut in half. Number of lines dropped by a bit. Total characters dropped by a whole bunch. And then looking at our different functions that we had in there, you know, running something like get decimals as part of the CIP10 standard saw a pretty decent increase. And especially looking at mining, claiming, and doing so when there's only 2 miners or if there's 129, these efficiencies were something that definitely helped. So I think with that, we as a community, need to figure out the best way to approach this optimization. And I think some standards could be put in place to help with this, because we don't want to sacrifice that readability, that decidability, that makes clarity such a beautiful thing. But as more contracts come online and logic gets more complex, I think we can work on some ways that make sense in a very simple way to help make these things as efficient as possible. Because at the end of the day, we're all competing for block space. And it's going to be something that I think will come to light over the next 6 months to 1 year as more of these contracts come online. All right, so another topic that I wanted to get into as well is a little bit about contract upgrades. So what I'm going to present here is a little bit of a pessimistic view, but let's look at it like nobody's perfect. You know, let's say nobody gets it 100% right the first time. Let's say that as much as we test and as much as we go through things, there could be bugs. And we might not have those issues, but if we plan for them ahead of time, and if we design the best way to upgrade, then at least we're thinking about it ahead of time rather than reacting to it after the fact. So some advice I wanted to share that was given to me from early adopters is really to make sure that we put getters around any of the key information, that we do our best to keep maps and data vars private, that we use @block and element as excellent ways to look through and chop up the data, and really to plan for the upgrades before the deployment. So what we're looking at, and actually what we're going over right now in our project, is what the upgrade path would look like. You know, what would happen if we deploy a contract for a city, and what would that next step be to get the version 2 online and to make sure that we don't affect the asset, especially talking about a token, in a way that it would be hard to upgrade and to continue. So this is something that is actively being discussed in our GitHub and something we are working to implement now and to learn ahead of time. Now, another thing that's really interesting in the terms of upgrades is this idea of app chains. Now, I can say this is something that has excited me from the beginning of the business models working group before the launch of Stacks 2.0. You know, we have this idea that the same way that Stacks settles on Bitcoin, why not have a separate network that settles on Stacks? And that can take the information that we're seeing all on-chain now and provide an off-chain method that is still related and still inherits the security in a very similar way. So what we've done to sort of implement and look at this is we've started with the fact that miners can submit a memo. Right now it's just above 34. And the idea is that this could be tied to something off-chain. So it could be the hash of something. It might even start as little messages from miners in the beginning. It'll be interesting to see what this evolves into. But the long-term goal would be that app chain nodes could assemble a blockchain from a separate peer network. So this is something that I just wanted to bring top of mind to everyone again, because as we're looking at the scalability of Stacks, app chains really show potential as a way to move forward and a way to look at this. And another thing that came up in my conversations with people is the use of BNS, specifically the attachments. So, you know, if there's a contract that can emit BNS events in a similar format, then the node can look at that and it can assemble and replicate data on-chain. So those are the main points that I just wanted to bring to people to think of as we're looking at upgrades and how to like future-proof these contracts and make sure that as we're moving forward, there's a path that we've at least considered. Finally, another fun topic that we got into and have learned a lot about is a little bit about contract review and auditing. You know, I think on anything like this, it's easy to get into your own bubble. And with that, we have reached out to auditors, and what I'm finding is that because we're all still early, things really take some time. So, you know, the quotes we received were several months out, the space is still evolving, the tools are still evolving. So I would like to encourage the community to help grow this list of auditors and experiences together. As we're going to be learning about what we're doing, we're definitely open to sharing and continuing with everyone to grow that. But it's something that I think as a community, we would really benefit by that process. In addition to that, I think another key step is really looking into peer review. We definitely have some Clarity experts out there, and we've been blessed with a bunch of help. I actually have Lucas on the call with me today, who has been a major contributor and an excellent helper as far as Clarity goes. And I've reached out to key people in the Stacks ecosystem to say, hey, will you look this over? Will you let us know what you see? And it's been a great process. So in the same way we could start building a list of auditors, we could also start building a list of those who are open to peer review. And it's just something that I wanted to bring up in general, because I think it would be really fun to see this come together and to build something that can really strengthen the development of new Clarity contracts as we move on through everything else. So with that, I know that was a really quick run over of a ton of information, but I did want to open up a little bit of time in case there were any questions. I'll take a minute here to kind of check the chat and the comments. And I'm really grateful for this opportunity to tell you a little bit about CityCoins. Oh, looks like I cannot see that window. All right, let me jump out of the presentation there. You'll see our GitHub at the top.
I'll let you know if any questions trickle in. People feel free to unmute and also ask questions. If your question is, Joe, where did you get that awesome Miami coin hat? The answer is at the Miami coin event. And unfortunately, you had to be there to get this limited edition swag.
Yes, yeah, I can say I have mine hanging up right here next to the good old Blockstack hoodie, just because it's nice to look back at where we've come and also look forward to where we're headed.
Yeah, I was blown away by the excitement about CityCoins, Miami Coin. A bunch of people were asking about it at the booth. It was definitely not just like a Stacks happy hour. A lot of just general Bitcoin people were intrigued by the project and stopped by. And that's why you have these big names getting interested by it, supporting it. You know, this isn't just Patrick or Jason shopping the idea around, forcing people to hop on board. You know, people have been looking for ways to keep neighborhood government and city government accountable and create a more bilateral relationship with the community, less the city telling you how it's going to be and what roads are going to get paved and what's going where. And exciting to kind of like, you know, we always say blockchain can like add transparency and reduce latency in so many different industries. And I think this one is definitely exemplary of that goal, the dream.
Definitely. And I think too, you know, what our focus here in the beginning was really to see what the basic implementation would bring to life, right? So the utility is a whole idea on top of that. Like, let's say you want to create an app that requires Miami coins in order to log in or to be a part of it. Or you may have a service that maybe by accepting payment in Miami coin and then being able to stack that to receive stacks and then stack your stacks to receive Bitcoin, you're realizing a new revenue stream that didn't occur before. And in doing that, it opens up some new possibilities for how you can interact with your customers. So there's been some really great ideas that have been kind of tossed around or talked about here in the beginning. And I think as we get this part implemented and deployed and in action, we're going to see a lot of new things grow on top of it. It definitely has a ton of potential. So I appreciate everyone's time. The last slide I have up here is just some resources. I will also have this presentation as a PDF if anybody would like a copy of it. And just so happy to be here and talk with everyone. Really excited to see what's coming alive on Stacks.
That's awesome. I have a quick question, Jason, about the mining. So for the mining, you can set you can spend it, you can set how much you want to spend, and then you can select 30 blocks, right?
Correct.
And that is how much time?
I believe that equates to about 4 hours.
Okay, and then will it be divided equally among those 4 hours?
Yes, yeah. So you would be basically choosing your block commitment for each block within the 30.
And then so my question is, how do I figure out how much that I want to contribute for those 30 blocks? And then is there a way to do it like more autopilot? Like, could I do it for longer than 30 blocks? Because I would rather set it for like a week or something, maybe play around with it a couple times for 30 blocks for the first day. But then after that, I want to kind of, set it for a week or even maybe like a month or longer?
Definitely. So one of the challenges we ran into around that comes back to the execution costs of the contract. So in being able to submit 30 transactions, it does call the same mine tokens function each time. And we're still looking at a way to optimize this to allow for longer periods. So it's definitely a question that we have open. And to answer your question about like knowing how much to contribute, in the UI, we have a plan to show the average commits across like the last 5, 30, 100, 300 blocks. That way you can view the past activity and what other miners are contributing. And those numbers should help with deciding on how much to commit and how to be competitive in this space.
And then are you going to repurpose this contract as well for Stacks mining at some point?
Well, it's slightly different from Stacks mining in the sense that, when you're running a node, you're performing the operations on the network. This contract is creating a new relationship and kind of creating a new structure on top of that. So I don't see it interacting directly with Stacks mining, but we're taking a lot of our learnings from what has happened there and trying to implement it in a way that could be put to good use. The key for us is really in that 30-70% split. So every miner's transaction, 30% of what they spend goes directly to that wallet custodied for the city. And that would become their treasury. And we are not dictating what the city should do with the money. And the reason for that is governments know how to run governments. And rather than try to prescribe what they need to do, we want to offer some suggestions, some ideas, and ideally they would find utility in stacking the stacks and using that Bitcoin yield as something that can really transform how they interact with their citizens.